Good evening. You are watching ThinkTech Asia. My name is David Day, and we're going to be addressing the rather unusual question about whether or not Israel will be the next energy superpower in the world. And to help us with this discussion, we've got Professor Rafael Boritzer with us. I'm going to call him Rafi, if that's all right with you.
That's fine. That's perfect.
And for those of you in the audience who haven't seen one of Rafi's fabulous shows, tell the audience a little bit about your show, Rafi, and when it's on so they know.
Well, we meet at the same place every Monday at 3 p.m. right here on ThinkTech Hawaii. It's Boritzer's Bio Briefings. And we talk about everything that has to do with development in pharmaceuticals, biology, pharmacology, medicine, hospitals, biotechnology, all those good stuff.
So today what we're going to do is we've captured Rafi for a very different topic than his regular shows. And even though this is a ThinkTech Asia show, think of the Asia as we're pushing the envelope to the west. So Asia, west of Asia. And here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen. Rafi is really a scholar of all things having to do with the Middle East. And in addition to being what we call a serial entrepreneur, if that's a fair description of you, you know, you know, he has that that special mentality that allows him to form successful businesses and then move on to the next one, which is an incredible talent. But so one of the standing jokes that has been around for a long time is that since the founding of Israel in 1948, people joke around that Moses brought his people to the only place in the Middle East that, or the one spot that had no oil. And this turns out maybe not to be correct after all, and because the flip side of that is maybe Israel has got more energy than she really knows what to do with, and we want to be drilling down into that conversation today with Rafi. So kind of to get things started, you know, Rafi, I know that you do a lot of consulting work having to do with maritime security here in the Pacific, on into the Indian Ocean, as well as in the Middle East. And you are really an expert on the whole field of geopolitics in the Middle East. So let's focus kind of at the beginning of this show a little bit on the oil and gas sector. And let's go dive right down into the whole situation involving these recent discoveries in Israel. And Control Room, if you could bring up photograph number 2, if we could here.
Okay.
And so, Rafi, we've got before the audience here a picture of the major Israeli offshore gas fields. And how about just describe the nature of the recent energy finds in Israel?
Well, I think that to call it recent is perhaps a little bit of diminutive, because Israel has been looking for petroleum resources, natural gas, oil, and so on, for a long time. And just to expand on what you said, they perhaps did not get their fair share of oil when the good Lord gave oil to everybody in the neighborhood. I think that Moses, when he went to get the tablets, I think God was telling him that he was going to send the Jewish people to Canada. And Moses preempted him and said, Canaan! Well, so be it. Okay. You know, if you don't let God finish off what he wanted to say, you end up in the wrong place, in a bad place in time. And for years, many people couldn't understand in the Middle East, how is it that all the countries in the neighborhood, if you look at the map, we don't see it quite extended there, but if you look at North Africa, you see that the oil fields stretch pretty much almost from Algeria to Morocco and so on towards Egypt. And even Egypt was blessed with a good oil supply. And if you look at the...
And even on westward from Egypt as well. Those countries
that's what I'm talking about. Morocco, Algeria, Tunis, and Libya. I mean, we talk about Gaddafi. He was sitting on a big playground, a big oil field, his own Exxon station, so to speak. And if you look further down, if Yeah, down at if you go south of Israel and you look down and next to separating Israel across the Gulf of Aqaba is Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, again, blessed with perhaps the biggest reserve in terms of oil in the Middle East. So Israel said, hey, we are deserving of something that's got to be in the middle. And they kept looking, and there was a site called Cheletz, and all kinds of places. They looked for all types of resources, came up dry. They looked in the Sinai because in the Gulf of Suez in Egypt, right, maybe a few hundred miles to the west of the Israel-Egyptian border on Sinai, there is the Gulf of Suez. And if I've sailed up the Red Sea on my way from Hawaii with my boat, and what I discovered there was that it was almost a minefield. It was derricks every place till you got to the beginning of the Suez Canal. So they had oil. Everybody's having oil. Israel punished.
Nothing, dry as a
Like
bone.
a curse, if you like, you know.
Okay.
But I don't want to stretch that because when you look also further north, when you look at Lebanon and Syria, they didn't do so hot either, and neither did Jordan. So it was a whole area that seemed to be fairly dry in terms of oil resources. And yet, if you go further east, we've got Iraq and Qatar and the
more
Emirates.
Exxon stations.
And just those three areas, they're perhaps dry. So they looked around, and they did come continuously dry. And I think it has to do with the forecast. Back in the 50s and 60s, who went looking for oil? Exxon, Shell,
right.
You know, the big companies that could afford. And they only went looking when there was a reason to suspect there was going to be a find. And I think that the technology has advanced a long way.
Sure.
Okay? And if you look even in America, who would have thought that America would become almost a superpower or self-indulgent or self-supporting in terms of energy resources just in the last 5 to 10 years? What happened? Technology happened. What happened? Computers happened. Satellite imaging, infrared imaging, where you could start identifying things. The ability to extract from shale oil, or what we call fracking. All these play, the technologies, is what made it possible to start looking anew, having a new outlook, having a new viewpoint. Hey, wait a second. And that started to bring to Israel and Jordan as well the ideas that perhaps there's more here than meets the eye, especially underground. So
and so we get a situation coming up historically, stopping short of the most recent developments that we're going to talk about, where Israel has got what? Before we get into like the last 5-10 years, let's say if we take from 2000 and go back, what does the energy situation look like?
It's terrible. Terrible. Israel had to sell its geopolitical soul, so to speak, make all kinds of deal to be able to develop, first of all, its energy needs, which for 8 million people, and it was before 6 million people, is not a lot.
So they were using coal-fired.
They were using coal fires for electricity.
Right, okay.
At the beginning of the state, there were many power outages. First of all, because the state didn't have enough money to finance the original establishment of the state of Israel, didn't have enough money to pay for energy, even though at those days it was still $2 a barrel out of Saudi Arabia. But guess what? When you've been at war with 7 countries in your neighborhood,
they're not likely to sell to you.
They're not going to be selling to you.
Okay, okay.
And it affected also the resources that were available to Israel to buy elsewhere, because there was pressure. The Arab countries put pressure on other suppliers, being in the cartel, since Saudi Arabia was the biggest.
You had an effective boycott.
You had a boycott of
okay, so you know, if we fast forward just a little bit on the natural gas side, you know, I'm trying to get so the audience sees the picture of the energy mix that Israel has. My understanding is that when the Arab winter occurred, it wasn't a spring. I promise you it wasn't a spring. And Morsi came into power. At that moment in time, what he did was chop off the natural gas supply that Israel was buying from Egypt at that time. And Israel took a hit of like 40% of their natural gas needs for the country. Is that about correct?
Well, what happened is Egypt developed its gas resource about the same time that at Actually, they went into a peace treaty with Egypt back in '79 under Anwar Sadat.
Okay.
A kind of a confluence of events, political, technological, and energy events all coming together. So part of the deal with the return of the Sinai was that the Egyptians would sell via a pipeline natural gas to Israel and also to Jordan. Because things in the Middle East have changed considerably since the Brits left in 1949. When they left Palestine, which became Israel, they also left all the other regions. It was the effective end of the mandate. The whole Middle East changed. People often don't reflect because there were no international warfare in the neighborhood, but there were internation warfare within each country, and all this affected the energy availability every place else.
So before we get to the relatively recent discoveries that we're going to talk about here, the picture that you're painting, Rafi, is of a country that is, number one, energy dependent,
right,
and energy dependent on some rather troublesome suppliers. By troublesome, I mean both troublesome and also not reliable, and their energy mix was pretty old-fashioned. You know,
well, let me throw something into the mix here, because we have to look at where the fuel was coming from. Israel's original big supplier was Iran until 1979.
Interesting.
What happened then?
Okay.
Wait, you see, people, unfortunately, in America, they focus on the prisoners that were taken hostage in Iraq. But they don't understand that the whole Middle East changed forever with that event.
This is with the Ayatollah.
Right, with the Ayatollah. And you have to remember, most Americans think that that was the beginning of America knowing Iran. No, it was the CIA knew Iran back in 1952 when they replaced the government in Iran through all kinds of machinations and put a Shah in power. They reset up the empire of Iran, the Persian Empire, in effect, so he would be the new pliable magistrate of Iran. Now that changed the whole thing. This made it very possible from 52, let's say, till 79, till the Iranian Revolution, for the West and Israel amongst those countries to be able to do deals to develop Iran. Iran actually developed during that period under the Shah, even though politically it was coercive, but in terms of a civilization, they came back. And so this sets the picture in Iran. Where else did Israel get the fuel from? Venezuela. You think they could get some today from Venezuela?
Probably not.
Probably not, right. And so you always have to look at what are the forces in the geopolitics. The Egyptians wouldn't sell any fuel to Israel until the peace agreement with Sadat, when they got Sinai back, that was conquered in 1969. So all these events. Saudi Arabia would never sell because they were the leaders. How could, you know, the head of the Islamic cartel, so to speak, give in to that? And they had America. They didn't need more. They didn't have to be compliant and pliant.
You know what? Hold that thought, because we're going to come back. We're going to take a break at the moment. This, I know this is a fascinating conversation to all of you. We're going to be drilling down more with Rafi Boritzer, Dr. Rafi Boritzer, on the issue of will Israel be the next energy superpower. And when we come back after the break, wait until you find out what the recent discoveries of Israel are in terms of magnitude. It will blow your mind. See you on the other side of the break.
Castle & Cooke, Hawaii. Investing in Hawaii, creating communities, and providing for the needs of our state. Collateral Analytics, empowering the real estate industry to make better informed property investment decisions. The Foreign Trade Zone, bringing the benefits of the Foreign Trade Zone programs to Hawaii businesses and entrepreneurs. Galen Ho, a senior executive of BAE Systems, a global defense, security, and aerospace company. Hawaiian Electric Company, and its affiliates Maui Electric and Hawaii Electric Light Company on Hawaii Island. The Hawaii Energy Policy Forum, incorporating diverse perspectives to design a flexible and forward-looking energy strategy. Hawaii Energy, the state's energy and efficiency program created to help Hawaii's residents and businesses adopt a clean energy lifestyle. Hawaii Gas, helping Hawaii achieve its transition to clean energy and a better energy future. Hawaii Pacific Health, bringing technology and teamwork together to transform healthcare in Hawaii. The High Tech Development Corporation, attached to DBED, is the state's leading technology agency. The SHIDLER Family Foundation, supporting educational, cultural, and charitable organizations, including ThinkTech.
We're back. This is ThinkTech's Asia, and in this particular program we are pushing the definition of Asia out west, way out into the Mediterranean. And our special guest is Dr. Rafael Boritzer, a known bon vivant of the Middle East, I think. And
you could say that.
Something like that, a serial entrepreneur, and also a real, if you've been watching this program, a real scholar on history and geopolitics of the Middle East, and we're going to take advantage of all of that in looking at this. Right before the break, Rafa, you were talking about pieces of the history of the development of classical fossil fuels in the Middle East. And why don't we pick up there so we finish giving the audience the kind of the historical picture before we move into the current situation.
I think what I would like to mention is people often think that once you discover oil, now you're a rich man. They think like in terms of Oklahoma or Texas.
Right.
You're driving, a
you're
guy
covered with
goes,
black gold.
and then he says, okay, I'm going to sign a contract with Shell. They'll send a truck over and we'll put a pipeline to the next Shell distribution center. In the real world, it's not like that. Because distribution is probably more important than the product. Because what do you do when you have the product? You can't eat it, you can't store it, and you can't refine it unless you have all these huge infrastructures. So even before Israel had developed an oil field on its territory, well, there was a refinery because it used to buy unrefined product from Iran. The refinery was built by the Brits in Haifa. If you look at the map, you'll see right over.
Let's go back to what do we need to look at?
Let's look at map number 1, the Times Israel natural gas there.
Okay.
Map 2, I'm sorry, map 2.
Map 2. Yeah, okay. And so you're...
Okay, so you can see when you look right in the center where you see a line, the line coming in, and see the word Dalit right under there, that's approximately a few miles north of Haifa.
I'll tell you what, hold 1 second, Rafi. Let's go control room to visual number 3, and maybe this will help the audience a little better.
Okay, so right under the sign where it says Israel, if you can see that little hook right over here, okay, that is actually the port of Haifa.
Okay.
Which has the refinery and basically the industrial center when the British Empire controlled the Middle East. That used to have a pipeline that goes all the way to Iraq. And the Brits were pumping because the Brits also controlled the whole Middle East under the mandate that was given in 1921 after the end of World War I. Right. So they've got all these things, but again, what are they going to do with this stuff? It's black stuff. You want to ship it cheap. Everything has to go. You don't want to ship it all the way from Iraq, going all the way down the Persian Gulf, Arab Gulf, whatever you want, down to Yemen, then up north to Suez. All the places are choke points where the oil could be held up in case of crisis, which it was in the Suez War in 1956, when Israel, the French, and the British attacked the Suez Canal in Egypt under Abdel Gamal Nasser, who was the Prime Minister of Egypt. So all these events, the history, the delivery, the sourcing, the power, the storage, all go into the oil equation. So let me bring it up a little bit up to date, and all this also, who's going to discover where the oil is? So they didn't find it on land.
So now we're back to the earlier point. They're searching and searching and nothing, and coming up dry.
And then you know, you go to Shell.
For oil in Manhattan.
You go to Shell, which is a Dutch company. You go to Mobil. You go to Exxon, Esso, all these companies, and they say, "Hey, you got a reserves? Show us some maps. Show us where the oil is. Show us where the gold is." And you got nothing because you don't have the $2-3 billion to do exploration.
Also, when they go to Shell, the Israelis go to Shell, Mobil, and Exxon, isn't there a reluctance of those companies to work with the Israelis?
Of course, because Saudi Arabia, the king hears, say, those Israelis are going to Shell. Let me get the president of Shell on the phone. He says, hey, you want us to renew those contracts? We have proven reserves for the next 150 years. Oh, you do? Well, I suggest you don't speak anymore to the Israelis. Let it go. So, I mean, this is real politics. It happens all over the world. Happened in Venezuela. It happens everywhere.
So Israel is dry.
So Israel is dry.
Okay.
Okay. So what happened to make the difference? Well, someone did the technology developed, and you could always, and also technology in America, the fracking and the shale oil and all this, and suddenly the Israeli Ministry of Energy decided that they were going further research and see what they can do. They go back to Texas. They hit Shell. They hit a few other places. They hijack a few people who are willing to live in Israel and work on the project and be entrepreneurial. And lo and behold, the first team discovers shale oil right on the Jordanian border with Israel.
And this is a significant discovery.
Significant discovery. Now, shale oil is a little more difficult. It's not like, just take a shovel and bingo, load the trucks
Right, but the technology is there to pull it.
The technology has developed over time, and suddenly in the last 5-6 years, bingo, it's possible.
So what we know about that particular energy deposit, Rafi, the shale oil. Let's go back to this map number 3, if you can. And so you're talking about a discovery that comes from the Lebanese border down the coastline, right?
Right.
On land.
Right.
This is the
on
first.
Land,
This I understand, ladies and gentlemen. This particular map you're looking at is focused on offshore natural gas blocks, but what Dr. Boritzer is talking about is a shale oil discovery of a magnitude that is something like what, Rafi, do you remember the approximate number?
I think they were talking the self-sufficiency for 100 years, basically.
So the number that I saw was in the oil, 250 billion barrels, which is roughly equal to the known reserves of Saudi Arabia.
Right.
Now, follow this conversation, ladies and gentlemen, because this is the starting point for our conversation today. Dr. Boritzer has just talked about one little piece of what Israel has discovered, and that he's talking about the onshore fracking possibilities equal to the reserves of Saudi Arabia. Think about that, because there are some serious political ramifications of that, geopolitical, that we'll get to later in the show here. Let's transition now to the area of natural gas, Rafi, because let's come back to this map number 3, if we can. Tell us about the natural gas discoveries.
Okay, there were several attempts to look for natural gas, none of them successful.
Again, it's the dry paddle.
It's a dry paddle. And if you look at the map, you'll see that offshore from Israel is a country we call Cyprus, which is about 90 miles from the very refinery I discussed in Haifa. That's the same distance as Cuba is from Miami.
Okay.
We're talking a very small distance.
In fact, a woman has made a swim.
Exactly,
okay.
swim.
Okay.
So anybody can swim, and lo and behold, the technology suddenly they're able to convince Shell Oil and a few other potential partners to at least talk to the Israel Ministry of Energy. They find also capital to invest in the exploration, and bingo, they start discovering really enough to sustain Israel at least for a long, long time. And that has always been the Israeli dream, energy self-sufficiency, and enough to pay, because here's the big problem. It's not enough, as I said, to get the gas. You got to get it to someone who's going to use it.
Okay, you got to move it.
You got to move it.
And so let's go to one possibility that's being talked about, and that's visual number 4A, if we could, control room. And so we've got here, the red line is something that doesn't exist today, so far as I know, Rafi, but we're talking about Israel jointly working with Cyprus, taking a pipeline right into the Italian boot.
Right, right. You know what? This whole thing was just a mere pipe dream. Excuse me, so to speak. But when you look at the events that happened in the Ukraine in the last few weeks, suddenly there are a lot more ramifications. There are a lot more potentials, not only for sales, but also for conflict.
You bet.
And I think that this suddenly gets not just a regional perspective, suddenly it gets a global perspective when we look at who the players are.
You know, one of the things before we move into the whole geopolitical ramifications part of this conversation, which I want to have with you, one of the things that is almost mind-blowing is that with this oil shale discovery along the coastal plain, that puts Israel undeveloped, but with reserves on a par with Saudi Arabia. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is, for a lot of you in the audience, that's news. That's something that the media hasn't brought out. They don't bring out very many positive things about Israel, but that is absolutely astounding. And then you've added on to that these enormous natural gas finds out in the Mediterranean between Israel and Cyprus, the Tamar field and the Leviathan field, which, you know, it's something in the 30 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. So you get energy reserves that are unbelievable, and yet Israel is a very small little country. So
8 million people.
8 million. So they're set.
Yes.
But they gotta export in order to develop that, though, right? You can't just hog it all for yourself.
Right. You got to control it. One of the big issues in Israel politically, internal politics, is Israel wanted to be self-sufficient, and suddenly people talking about export, getting rid of this stuff. When everybody said, no, we got to have enough for our children and grandchildren. Well, now there is enough, theoretically, for children and grandchildren, as long as natural gas still continues to be a viable fuel, because there are questions in global warming. Also, it's less than coal, but it's still a dirty fuel because it burns and creates methane in the air. But the real question is, what I want you to consider, aside from that, I want you to think about a word that starts with Q.
Cuba.
Q. No. Q, you know what I'm talking about. Qatar. Qatar. How many of you have watched Al Jazeera? The channel, the international global channel that's now on Times Warner Television. You can see it continuous. All American newscaster or British, the top newscasters. The news, I would say, is pretty objective. But who is Qatar? When was the last time you went to Qatar?
I've never been to Qatar.
Well, I was there about 3 years ago. But most people don't go there. But everybody knows the name suddenly. Why? Because Qatar, which is the size of Oahu, has perhaps, well, I'm exaggerating a little, but has as much wealth as the whole Arab world put together. And suddenly they create a worldwide television network. Suddenly they're dictating to the king of Saudi Arabia. They're telling him what that they're not going to do. Imagine a little country where I think they have as many people as Maui.
Imagine the ramifications of what
and they have natural gas.
Imagine what you've just said that Israel could do.
That's what I'm telling you.
Okay, hold it.
Power! Power to the people!
Hold on a second. Hold on. Yeah, we're going to go to a break, ladies and gentlemen, but before we do, those of you that have your Bibles handy, why don't you pull out Deuteronomy 33:19? And when you do that, look at this discussion that I'm having with Dr. Boritzer, and then look at the language in Deuteronomy. It says, they will feast on the abundance of the seas and on the treasures of the sands. We'll be back after this break.
I'm Jay Fidel. That's Sharon Moriwaki of the Hawaii Energy Policy Forum. And every Wednesday we have Hawaii, the State of Clean Energy. We've been doing it for some time now, and we have some fantastic guests on there, unbelievable guests who give us insight into what is going on in a very complex, sometimes very confusing, sometimes very disappointing area of progress in the state. So we love doing this. We love meeting them. We love talking to them. We love having their ideas out on the table. So maybe, just maybe, we can all make some sense of what's going on. Sharon, what do you you think?
I think that's absolutely correct. We enjoy ourselves meeting with all these people and hearing about the energy and the state of clean energy, and hopefully we advance clean energy for the state. So it's terrific. Join us.
Okay, it's every Wednesday. Okay, Wednesday is Energy Day. Every Wednesday, 4 to 5 p.m. Hawaii, the state of clean energy, here on ThinkTech Hawaii. We'll see you there. I'm Jake Biden.
We are back, and you are watching The Question. How you watch a question is another thing, but we want to find out, will Israel be the next energy superpower? Our special guest in the studio, we've pried him away from his regular show, is Dr. Rafael Boritzer, a general bon vivant, serial entrepreneur, and a man who knows everything about the Middle East there is to know. And so, Rafi, with that as a humble introduction, I could do more, but good enough for government work, as my father used to say. Let's talk about this potential rise of Israel as an energy power. Now, you know, we know that she's got the reserves. She's got the attention of some significant investors out of the United States, Noble Energy out of Houston, Texas, and starting to produce at that Tamar platform, which, ladies and gentlemen, you just saw there. That's control room. Let's come back to number 1A for just a second. That's the Tamar platform. That's producing 1 billion cubic feet of natural gas a day right now. And so Israel is not even warming up yet. Engine hasn't hit operating temperature in terms of her energy production. Let's shift now, Rafi, to what does this really mean? You know,
I'm glad that you asked. You know, most mothers, if they were like my mother, used to say, before you get married, what do you know about the family, the friends, and the neighborhood? And I say the same thing to Israel. Be careful. Before you get married to anybody, check out again who's living in the neighborhood, who her friends are, and who are the relatives. And Israel is in a very peculiar situation, because whatever step it makes in terms of decisions that have to do with the use of the oil resources, they're going to make friends and offend some other people.
You bet.
So the first question that comes up, now is I keep hinting at this, maybe more than hint, but I say it's not enough to have the oil or the natural gas, you've got to distribute it. And the question is, yes, it has a lot of reserves, but until 2017 or 2018, those reserves will not be able to be used in large quantities. Why? You have to collect them, you have to ship them, you have to process it. So there's already a plant off the coast, I believe it's either off Ashdod or off Caesarea and Hedera, where they process the natural gas. But
this is a floating platform.
Right, floating platform. But the real serious stuff, the real movement where you can make money from natural gas, you've got to get quantity. So you've got to build either two things. Either you do pipelines, or you're going to have a processing plant near the wells, and actually they're distributed from there.
This is to kick it into liquid form.
Right. The problem is that it's the kind of investment that Israel's economy could not sustain without partners.
Okay, so there's got to be a marriage. That's where you're going.
That's what I'm talking about, marriage. So once you get into a marriage, now comes the question. You know, it's easy to get married. It's also easy to get divorced today. It's not like, you know, that they're going to hang you if you leave the marriage. And so consequently, before you get into the marriage bed, so to speak, you have to decide who you want it to be. So if you're going to go with the distribution locally, that means all you have to do is build, I'm being simplistic, all you have to do is build a pipeline from the fields, get it into Israel, distribute.
Okay.
Now, that's ideal in terms of political control. In terms of political control, to distribute it, you can distribute that from Israel to the Palestinian Authority. You can distribute it back to Egypt. You can distribute it to Syria or Lebanon. I'm being hypothetical at this point because we don't know. Or Jordan, which is even more important because Jordan is an ally of Israel.
All right, hold on a second now. you're not really talking theoretical on all of this.
None of it is theoretical, because Israel today supplies Jordan with natural gas.
And there are contracts out with Palestine
today.
And with Israel, with Egypt today? Is there a contract?
Well, Egypt, it's one way, but they keep blowing up their pipeline. But I mean, they at some point will be needing energy. You're talking about over 60 million people that need to develop in the next 50 years. It's not going to help, even if you wish them away. They're not going away. They're going to need a lot of resources, technologies. They're going to need the support that Israel can give to an
all right, let's focus on Jordan for a minute now. So now we got we know that Jordan, the royal family in Jordan is in a kind of shaky political ground.
Always been, yeah.
Always been. Now this alliance with Israel, stapled together by energy, does that help the royal family in Jordan, do you think?
I think it would take the pressure off the Jordanians, perhaps discomfort with, is there natural gas coming from Egypt across the Sinai, across Israel to Jordan? Or do we have to depend upon the Iraqis? Or do we have to depend upon someone else like Saudi Arabia? Here there is a guaranteed source that they know is reliable.
All right, so Rafi, think of this as if you and I were putting out one of these big puzzles on the table. So we have the Israeli energy piece in the center. It's sort of like laying a tile floor in your kitchen. The most important one that you put down is the first one. So we have this piece. If the second piece is in fact Jordan, how do the other Arab countries react to that?
Well, this is the most wonderful thing that's happening. You know, this is the good news. You know, the good news. The good news is that not only is the world in flux, but the Middle East is in a huge transition. And there's huge changes going to be. And I would even dare say that Iran is now considering, is it going to be a developer of this distribution network together with Israel across the Middle East?
Wait, say that again?
Iran is thinking, what's the next step? Does it go along with Syria and compete with an Israeli network? Or does it join the Israeli network so it doesn't have to be a competitor but a supplier?
Is that a serious, because I don't know, is that a serious?
You know what, if someone would have said that to the gang that installed the Shah of Iran, that this would be a possibility, people would have said they're crazy.
They're nuts.
But in effect, the U.S. and Israel built the economy of Iran in the early 50s. And that's what got the Ayatollah and those boys so excited about everything. So things in the Middle East right now, everything is in play. You know, we know where the danger spots. We know where the cracks in the infrastructure is, and with the Syrians and the instability of Iraq and so on. The question is, how do you, what's the new scenario of the Middle East? Because we have definitely seen the Saudi power is perhaps kind of resting, you know, transitory at this point. There are too many competitors, and they've got dirty oil. Qatar has natural gas. Israel may have natural gas. What's happening? What's changing here? A lot is changing, because also Libya has natural gas, but Libya is unstable. So what is going to unify all these areas in some level? Is there going to be this big schematic?
What's your prediction? For just focus on the Middle East now.
I think that traditionally, and I've stated this on this channel before, the whole realignment in the Middle East will produce pivoting between Egypt, Iran, and Iraq. Realignment. All the time they're jockeying for position. And the Ottoman Empire in Turkey. Israel is very solid, even though it doesn't seem like that from the newspapers with the Ottoman Empire. I think Israel and Turkey will be solid. The question is, what role? Traditionally, the Egyptians have been the balance, but what role Iran will play in this?
Let's let me pose a question to you before we go to the break, Rafi, so you can think about it. When we come back from the break, let's shift the geopolitical crosshairs, if you will, the sights from the Middle East into the current situation that we see, the Ukraine and into the EU. And when we come back after the break, let's look at the possible ramifications of this explosive energy development in Israel upon the EU, and how their perception of Israel might shift.
Well, okay, that's a good
We'll
point.
do that.
That's a
We'll
good
see you on
point.
the other side of the break.
Hi, I'm Attila Saras, host of Next Big Thing, the ThinkTech show, where we give people a place with great ideas, a chance to share them with the world. Be sure to tune in this Friday from 4 to 4:50 p.m., and I will see you there.
Aloha, I'm Maria Kashem of ThinkTech Hawaii, and I want to tell you about our ThinkTech talk shows. If you didn't know it, ThinkTech streams video and audio for all of its shows live on the internet from 2 to 5 p.m. every weekday afternoon, and we replay them all night long on ustream.tv. Visit thinktechhawaii.com for our live stream and YouTube links. Raise your awareness on ThinkTech. I'm Maria Kashem, and I'll see you there.
Aloha, I'm Jay Fidel of ThinkTech. We have some news for you. In addition to our ThinkTech TV show and our Asia in Review show on Olelo 54, as of January 1st, we're adding Community Matters to play also 2 hours a week. Check out thinktechhawaii.com for the specific times of each of these shows. We hope you enjoy all three. Mahalo, I'm Jay Fidel.
We're back. You're watching ThinkTech Asia. Our special guest is Dr. Rafael Boritzer, professor, serial entrepreneur, and at the break we were talking about a shift in the whole geopolitical ramifications of this enormous energy finds in Israel. And what we want to do for this beginning of this segment, Rafi, is what does this mean for Europe and its perceptions of Israel?
So let me throw some things that are happening with Europe and Israel. Okay, because of the dissonance in the peace talks that Secretary Kerry has tried to get going between the Palestinians and Israelis, and I think he's getting a little disgusted, and I really don't blame him, because I know the players he has to deal with. It's like taking kids to kindergarten who are fighting among themselves all the time, but you know they got to get through school one way or another. The find in Israel makes Israel a player in a way that is going to disturb certain countries. It's going to disturb those people who are currently supplying energy
like
from
Russia.
the Middle East. Well, let's start the Middle East. We talked about that. So the Middle East is going to feel effect. Maybe not Saudi Arabia, maybe not Iran, because they're big players. But everybody else, you know, the smaller players, the smaller distributors, I'm sure the Qataris are not worried because they've got a trillion worth of gas. But the Europeans, which like to take a moralistic position in terms of what's happening in the Middle East, a judgmental position more correctly, they may be cut off from Russia, either for political reasons, trying to be allied with the United States, or for pricing, or being shut out because they supported Ukraine, or because the Turks decide that maybe they don't need the oil from Kazakhstan and across the Caspian Sea, those pipelines they are building now, and they don't need the oil from Russia. Maybe it's a better bet to get this stuff coming through Israel. Now, many people think that Israel and Turkey are at war. No, they're not at war. They're at what we call a newspaper war across, you know, the media. Those are the easy wars. No one gets really hurt or killed most of the time.
Control room, let's go back to number 4A, if we could, visual 4A, just for our audience so that you can follow what Dr. Boritzer is saying. One of the ways that Israel might supply energy, both oil and natural gas, this is a natural gas proposal here, into Europe would be through this pipeline that goes Haifa, Cyprus,
either Turkey or directly to Greece,
or into Italy someplace. Okay, so where are we now?
So now, remember we talked a few minutes ago, maybe about 20 minutes ago, we talked about the distribution with the natural gas.
Right.
So if you decide that you're going to do pipelines are expensive, but you can now suddenly destroy someone's economy, like the Russian economy of distribution, because the Russian economy is all extractive. It's all based on oil, natural gas, selling, not development. But if Israel starts building pipelines, suddenly that subverts the Russian eco-political machine. But Russia likes to count on Israel as a friend. But it's a very strange friendship, because Russia is also friends of Iran and Syria. But so sometimes Russia can act as an intermediary, and if suddenly Israel bypasses it and allows fuel to get to the Europeans without having to pass the Russian tax roadhouse, and political control roadhouse, who's our friend? You're not our friend anymore. And and on and on and on. So this has actually geopolitical consequences.
Well, Rafi, let me pour some gasoline on these flames.
Go ahead, go ahead.
A little bit.
Light her up.
All right. On Tuesday of this week, Russia's state-owned enterprise, Gazprom, made an announcement that it was jacking up the price for natural gas to the Ukraine by 44%. Now, I don't know what the ramifications of that price hike are for the rest of Europe, because the 18 or so pipelines that go through the Ukraine go on to Europe for natural gas. And I don't know whether it's, there's a way that only the Ukraine is going to pay. But the interesting part of that move is that I looked up this morning before we did our show, the corporate report for Gazprom, which is the largest company in Russia, and in fact, one of the largest globally.
Right.
And they have been taking enormous losses because their whole system is so inefficient. So now they got a 44% price hike to the Ukraine. And I ask you, who's going to pay for that? It's not the Ukrainians, they're bankrupt.
Right, they don't have any money.
So as a result of a foreign policy geopolitical bungle involving Ukraine and the Crimea, it seems to me that the EU and the US are going to be on the hook via loans to replenish Gazprom's coffers, if you will.
I think it's a very dangerous thing. It's one of the joys, like the queen or the king of any country, they get to sit on a throne and they go in a carriage or on a Rolls Royce. They get all the goodies.
That's right.
But with goodies comes responsibility. So with power, you have their drawbacks. The British, unfortunately, have no power, but they got the ceremony. Now, the other countries like the U.S., Russia, and China, the big superpowers, so to speak, they want, for their largesse or for their goodness or for their protection, they want to be paid. And the Russians are no different than the U.S. I mean, when the U.S. was unhappy with the Egyptians, cut off the spigot, bingo. No weapons, no arms, no goodies for you. Venezuela, you don't act the way we are, no good. Central America, the same. The same thing in the Russians. The Russians are identical to any superpower. The Chinese, the same. They're squeezing the Filipinos because they want the route to China across from the Gulf to be under their control. Every major superpower dreams of controlling the sea lanes and controlling the areas and so on. And the Russians are doing it now because they have the ability. So the question is, who do you want to control the valves to your spigot? And I believe that the solution is always to let the little countries have the spigots that have nothing to gain or lose, just business. Business is just business. And we don't pass judgments about global affairs. The big energy controlling countries don't like that.
Well, just final thought before this show is over here. I know the time has gone really fast.
I'm sorry.
No, there's a lot to cover. You covered a lot. What is the effect if Israel becomes a major energy supplier to Europe? What's the effect on the European mentality or perception of Israel? Is there a shift going on?
Listen, if I give you an allowance every week, you're going to start saying, hey, Dad, your allowance, I don't like your... No, suddenly you're my best friend. You got your allowance, right? That's it. The same thing is with it. He who gives, gets.
Well, it's been a fabulous discussion. There's more to it. We'll have to do another show in the future. You've been watching ThinkTech Asia. I'm your host, David Day. Stay with us. We'll be back with you again next Thursday at 4 o'clock. And Rafi, when is your show time again?
Mondays, 3 p.m., Boritzer's Bio Briefings.
And you won't get this kind of geopolitical discussion from Rafi at his own show, but I'm going to get him back here on ThinkTech Asia.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
And I want to say, as we were talking, the Yemenite ambassador called me up. He invites you to spend a weekend in Yemen.
Invites you?
No, you. He said, bring your guest along with you to Yemen. He
said,
a weekend for two.
Just what I need. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Have a good night.